She turned me down when I was a waiter. Last night, she walked into the restaurant I now own. Wait, you're the owner? She asked it like I just told her the soup was made out of unicorn bones. Half laughing, half choking, and still trying to figure out if someone was playing a very elaborate prank. I'd seen that expression before years ago, but never aimed at me like that. Shock, yes. Confusion, definitely. But this time it was dipped in something else. Guilt, maybe. Regret. Or just disbelief that the guy she once brushed off like lint from her blouse was now the one who signed the checks in this place. This place. She stood there in the lobby, blinking against the soft gold lighting and trying to make sense of it all. The kind of lighting that makes you feel a little more expensive just by standing under it. A slow jazz track hummed from the ceiling, and you could smell citrus and rosemary from the kitchen. My kitchen. I was still in my chef's coat. Not a tux, not a suit. Just the one I wear when I'm plating, because even though I'm the owner, I still like to cook. Keeps my hands honest. The sleeves were pushed up, and I had a towel in one hand, wiping down from finishing up a trout dish when my hostess, Mia, poked her head into the back. "Table 12 says they know you," she'd whispered, her mouth already smirking like she knew something delicious. "Samantha. Brown hair. Red dress. Looks like she doesn't know if she's at a dinner or a job interview." I froze mid-wipe. Not because I was nervous, just stunned. That name had stayed with me in the weirdest, smallest ways. Like how you remember the smell of a place where something embarrassing happened. I hadn't heard her name in years, but it still knocked something loose in the back of my head. And now here she was, in the city's top restaurant, standing 6 feet away from a guy she rejected in a half-lit booth of a second-rate Italian joint 6 years ago. She wore confidence like perfume, subtle but overwhelming when you were close enough. Hair done up soft, makeup polished. A red dress that said, "I want to be seen but not too easily read." Classic. Strategic. She looked like everything I once thought I'd never be part of. I didn't say anything at first. Just walked up, towel still in hand, and gave her that half-smile I used to practice in the bathroom mirror when I was broke and trying to learn charm from YouTube videos. "Welcome to Juniper," I said, voice even, eyes locked on hers. "Samantha, right?" And there it was. The double take. That subtle shift in posture. The way her perfectly done brows pulled together like a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. Her mouth opened a little. I didn't know you worked here." "I don't," I replied. "I own it." That hit her like a glass of cold water. She laughed, but it cracked a little at the end. "No, seriously. I'm serious." You could see it, the gears turning, trying to connect this man me, with the kid in the apron at Sal's on 5th, who once nervously cleared her dessert plate and asked her out with the worst timing and probably a little marinara on his sleeve. I watched her take it in, slow. The walls, the open kitchen, the awards by the host stand, the sleek menu. My name, subtly printed at the bottom like I'd finally signed something with pride. That's the thing about success. When it finally shows up, it doesn't come with trumpets. It just walks in, quiet and calm, and changes the temperature of the room. And she was feeling it. She tried to gather herself. "Wow, that's really something. Congratulations." "Thanks," I said simply and turned slightly, nodding toward the table her date had just been seated at. "Would you like me to recommend a wine pairing? Or maybe you want the waiter's special tonight?" Her smile froze, and for a second, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of the jazz track and the faint clinking of silverware from the dining room behind her. That was when it hit me. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even smug. I was just standing. Taller, maybe. Fuller, definitely. The ball was in my court. But now I had to ask myself, was I going to play it? Or walk away? Sal's on 5th wasn't the kind of place dreams were born. More like the kind they quietly went to die, somewhere between the sticky laminated menus and the deflated breadsticks. I started there when I was 23, mostly because it was close to my apartment and didn't ask too many questions about your resume, as long as you could carry 3 plates at once and smile like your life wasn't actively unraveling. Back then, I was one of those waiters who pretended to enjoy it, like if I leaned into the charm hard enough, I might trick the universe into promoting me. I had a whole routine. call everyone boss or my friend, throw in a joke about the weather, and pray no one noticed the sole of my shoe was hanging on by gum and hope. That night, I remember every single detail. It was a Thursday, and the place was weirdly packed for a weeknight. We had a bachelorette party near the window, some older couple who kept asking if the chicken parm had too much garlic, and a table of 4 near the back, girls in sleek dresses, hair done up like they were about to audition for a Netflix series. And then there was her, Samantha. She wasn't loud, not the way her friends were, but she had this ease about her. Like she knew how to hold a room without needing to prove it. She laughed in a way that made people lean in. Confident, composed, probably had a real job, one that didn't come with a name tag and mystery stains. I was halfway through my shift, apron sagging, mind numb from repeating the specials, when I brought them their check. She smiled when I set it down. I smiled back. And I don't know what it was, lack of sleep, adrenaline, or just the deep, dumb human need to be seen, but I heard myself ask, "Hey, you ever want to grab coffee sometime?" Simple. Polite. Not pushy. I thought. She blinked like I just asked if I could borrow her car. And then she gave me that look. You know the one. Half pity, half confusion. Like I was a math problem she couldn't solve. Her eyes flicked to her friends who had gone silent. No offense, but I don't date waiters. Her voice wasn't cruel. Just factual. Like she was telling me she didn't eat gluten. But somehow that made it worse. Her friends laughed, not hard, but enough. One of them muttered something about me being ballsy, and the other added, "He's kinda cute, though." Samantha just slid her card into the billfold and didn't look up again. I nodded, smiled like it didn't sting, picked up the check and walked off. Back in the kitchen, I stood by the dishwasher for a full minute just breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. But something settled in my chest that night, heavy and hollow at the same time. Not just from the rejection, but from how small I'd felt. Like I didn't belong in the world she lived in, and I'd been foolish to even pretend I could. After my shift, I walked home through streets that smelled like stale beer and late-night pizza grease, the kind of smell that clings to you when you're broke and 30 minutes from your dreams. In my tiny studio, I microwaved soup and sat on the edge of the pull-out bed that doubled as a couch. I didn't think about her face or her friends. I thought about the way she said waiter, like it was a full stop. And that's when something shifted. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted to get even. But because I realized something real. I didn't want to be the guy people laughed off while waiting for dessert. I wanted to own the place they couldn't get into without a reservation. I didn't sleep much that night. But the next morning I looked at the clock-in sheet at Sal's and started drawing up ideas on the back. There's something strangely satisfying about silence in a crowded place. That low, humming pause right before someone says the one thing that changes everything. That's what it felt like, standing there with Samantha's gaze locked on mine, like we were suspended between 2 stories, hers and mine, and neither of us quite knew how to finish the chapter. I could see her trying to process it. She glanced again at the handwritten "Tonight's Specials" board in its sleek brass frame, the signature at the bottom, chef and proprietor, Daniel Hart. The same name I used to scribble on the backs of napkins during breaks at Sal's, imagining it on a restaurant someday even when I could barely pay rent. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Wow," she finally said. "You really made something of yourself." It wasn't a compliment. Not exactly. More like someone trying to tiptoe through a memory they'd rather not admit to carrying. "I had help," I replied. "A lot of long nights. A few people who believed in me when it didn't make sense to. A dishwasher gig that turned into a kitchen job that turned into a second mortgage and way too much debt before it turned into this." I motioned around the room like it hadn't cost me pieces of myself to build. She laughed, nervous now. "Well, it's beautiful. I mean it. This place is incredible. Thanks." Behind her, I saw the host stand light up with another arriving reservation. I gave Mia a quick nod. She could handle it. This was something I needed to finish. Her eyes wandered to the open kitchen where my crew moved with that synchronized chaos only a good team pulls off. I saw her spot the Michelin plaque half hidden behind a wine rack. She caught it and glanced back at me with something closer to disbelief than awe. "I read about this place in Modern Table actually," she said. "Didn't even put it together?" I nodded. "Most people don't. I keep a low profile. Let the food do the talking." She looked down at her heels for a second. "Listen. I didn't mean to be rude. Back then." "You weren't rude," I said. "You were honest." She blinked. Still. I was young. So was I. I could feel the tension bubbling up, not the angry kind, but the kind that comes when history sits down at the same table as the present. We weren't those people anymore, not exactly. But I hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be dismissed like I was just passing time until something better came along. And now? Now I had a decision to make. I could turn this into a moment, the kind people write about. Maybe say something clever. Maybe make her squirm a little. Maybe seat her at the worst table in the house just to prove a point. Or I could just let it go. Not because I wasn't still carrying a little bruised pride, but because maybe the best revenge was standing here, steady, calm, and not needing any revenge at all. I stepped aside. Your table's ready. Please follow me. She hesitated like she wanted to say something else. But instead, she just nodded, collected herself, and followed. As I walked her to table 12, I kept wondering. What am I really trying to prove here? Was it enough to be successful? To be remembered? Or was I still looking for something else, validation, maybe? Closure. Maybe I was about to find out. She looked smaller at the table. Not physically, Samantha still had that polish, that posture like she belonged wherever she was, but the glow was dimmed. There was something about the lighting at Juniper that softened people, made them feel like part of the space instead of the center of it. Funny how a place can do that better than most people can. I stood behind the glass wall of the kitchen, arms crossed, pretending to supervise plating. Truth was, I was watching her. She sat across from a man I didn't recognize. Tall, square jaw, expensive watch. He was leaning forward, talking a lot with his hands, sales type, maybe? She nodded along but kept glancing toward the kitchen like she couldn't stop herself. Mia walked up beside me, sipping her tea. So that's the girl? I didn't answer. She followed my gaze. She's looking over here like you're the mystery ingredient in her risotto. She'll get over it, I said. You okay? I gave a half shrug. Just funny how people show up. Mia nudged me with her elbow. Funny how you're pretending you're not still figuring out if you want to make her pay for dinner or clear the table yourself. I smirked. She wasn't wrong. The guy with her, let's call him wristwatch, seemed oblivious. He was trying hard, that much was obvious. Leaning in, laughing a little too loud, ordering the most expensive things like he needed the food to impress her more than his company did. She laughed politely but stirred her wine like it was telling her secrets. She was somewhere else. I could tell. And I hated how much I noticed. Back in the kitchen, I busied myself with the next round of entrees. My sous chef, Andre, gave me a sideways look. You're seasoning the cod like it owes you money, he said. I looked down. The fish had enough cracked pepper to qualify as a hate crime. I eased up. Half an hour later, Mia popped back into the kitchen with a raised brow. So, she asked for the chef. I turned to her slowly. She asked for me? Mia nodded. Said she wanted to thank you personally. I stared at the plating station for a beat, trying to decide if I cared. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe she just wanted to be polite. Maybe she was trying to tie up a thread I hadn't asked to be pulled. But I could feel that same tightness in my chest I used to get when checking the tip on a table I gave my all to. Still needing approval. Still chasing a kind of validation I swore I'd grown past. I took off my apron, wiped my hands, and headed out. I didn't know what I was walking into, but it sure wasn't just a thank you. She stood up before I even reached the table. That caught me off guard. Most people don't stand for the chef unless they're taking a picture or unless they're about to leave a Yelp review in person. But Samantha stood like she was unsure of the rules. Like maybe she didn't know where we stood anymore. Daniel, she said softly. There it was. My name out of her mouth like it still belonged to a version of me she hadn't quite let go of. I gave a small nod. Hope everything's been good so far. It's more than good, she said. This place is amazing. I mean it. The food, the vibe, the way your team works like a machine, it's just, wow. I offered a practiced smile. I'll pass it along to the crew. Wristwatch, her date, stood too, smoothing down his tie like he was joining a board meeting. Hey, man. I was just telling Sam, this place? Wild. You've really built something here. Sam. So they were on nickname terms. Okay. Thanks, I said. We shook hands, firm but not too firm. Businessman handshake. No calluses. The kind of guy who probably writes emails with "per my last message" and gets invited to golf tournaments he doesn't enjoy. I was telling him how we knew each other, Samantha added carefully. Back in the day. That line hung in the air like steam from a hot plate. Could have let it go. Could have nodded, said something vague like, small world, and walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, yeah, I remember. Her smile faltered for half a second. Just a flicker like a light bulb trying to stay on. She gestured to the seat across from her. Do you have a minute? I hesitated. I really did. I had orders backing up in the kitchen, a sauce that needed checking, and a delivery guy probably trying to squeeze a pallet through a back door that wasn't wide enough. But I sat. Not for her. For the ghost between us. She glanced at her date. "Do you mind giving us a second?" Wristwatch blinked, surprised, but to his credit, he just nodded and said he'd go check out the wine wall. I watched him walk off, still halfway expecting to hear this was all part of some social experiment. She folded her hands on the table. Her nails were neat, natural, nothing flashy. That struck me. "I don't know why. I didn't know this was your place," she said. "I figured. And I wasn't expecting to run into you. I almost didn't recognize you." "People change," I said. "Some of us, anyway." She winced. Not dramatically, just enough that I knew she heard it. "You remember that night?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Not something you forget," I replied, my voice lower than I meant. She stared at her water glass for a beat, then looked back up. "I was a jerk." I didn't answer. Worse than a jerk. I was arrogant, shallow. Thought I had everything figured out because I had a fancy internship and a dress that fit well. "And a waiter asking you out." She laughed, dry. "Yeah, that too." For a second, we just sat there. Not in the restaurant. Not even in the city. Just two people sitting in the back booth of a memory neither of us really made peace with. "You know," I said, "I used to replay that night like it was a scene in a movie. Not because I was mad, but because I couldn't believe how small it made me feel. Like I was a footnote in someone else's story." She swallowed hard. "You were never small, Daniel. I was just too self-absorbed to see past my own table." The words landed heavy. Honest. Maybe too late. Maybe not. I didn't know what I wanted from her. An apology? Closure? Some kind of cosmic reversal where she sees me now and regrets everything? But all I saw was a woman who once made me feel invisible. Now looking at me like I'd become the only thing in the room. And I didn't know what to do with that. We were mid-silence when Wristwatch came back. He had a glass of Cabernet in hand, like he thought holding it made him look more relaxed than he actually was. "Everything all right?" he asked, eyes darting between us like he'd walked in on something mid-sentence. Samantha straightened in her chair, just a twitch of the shoulders, but it told me everything. Whatever version of the past she'd slipped into with me. She snapped out of it the second he reappeared. "Yeah," she said too quickly. "We were just catching up." He gave me a tight smile. "Well, I hope you don't mind, but I went ahead and ordered the duck." "It's a good choice," I said, standing. "Kitchen does it justice." The tension hovered like steam off a dish just pulled from the oven. Samantha was quiet, eyes on the tablecloth. Wristwatch didn't notice, he was too busy checking the time on his actual wrist. I turned to go, but she spoke up, voice softer than before. "Daniel, thanks for stopping by." And just like that, it was over. Conversation closed. Curtain dropped. She was back in her role, smiling like nothing had happened. Like the last few minutes had been nothing more than polite nostalgia. But my chest still felt tight. Not angry, not sad, just unfinished. Back in the kitchen, Andre raised an eyebrow as I walked in. "That looked like fun," he said, half joking. I didn't answer, just reached for a pan and started prepping the next order. The rhythmic motions helped. Cut, flip, sear. The little rituals of a night in full swing. But in the back of my mind, that conversation kept replaying. And not the words, just the weight of them. The way she looked when she said, "You were never small." I thought it might feel good to hear that. I thought I'd feel taller. But mostly I just felt tired. Later that night, long after the rush had calmed, I walked through the dining room, wiping tables out of habit. Table 12 was empty. Chairs pushed in. Napkins folded. No trace of her, like she'd been a ghost passing through. But tucked under the water glass, barely visible, was a handwritten note. Just 2 lines. "You were never small. I just wasn't ready to see you." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what she wanted from me now. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to be remembered differently than how she'd left me. But here's the thing, closure never arrives the way you expect it. Sometimes it shows up in a red dress, over duck and wine, whispering apologies when no one else is listening. Sometimes it looks a lot like a question you haven't answered yet. The note sat in my pocket the rest of the night. I didn't fold it neatly. Didn't smooth it out or tuck it into a drawer like some treasured keepsake. I just kept it there, creasing under the weight of my hand, warmed by body heat and memory. It wasn't the words that stuck. It was the handwriting. Clean. Measured. But with that same curved D I remembered from the receipt she signed at Sal's all those years ago. Strange what stays with you. After closing, I walked the dining room like I always did. Lights low, soft shadows stretching across polished wood and brass. The smell of lemon oil and roasted thyme still lingered. Most nights, this part felt peaceful, like the calm exhale after a hard run. But tonight, the silence buzzed. I stopped in the hallway by the restrooms, small, narrow, unremarkable. Except tonight, someone else was there. Wristwatch. Alone. He was leaning against the wall, phone in hand, eyes scanning a text thread with a frown that looked like it had settled permanently into his face. When he saw me, he straightened. "Oh. Hey," he said, like he'd been waiting for this and trying to look casual about it. I nodded slow. "Everything all right?" Yeah. He slipped the phone into his blazer. Just stepped away for a minute. Needed to check something for work. There was a beat of silence. Then he glanced toward the dining room, then back at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, though everything in me was already pulling away. "How long have you known her?" That caught me off guard. "We met years ago. Long before tonight." He gave a tight nod like he'd suspected as much. "She seemed different around you. People get reflective in nice restaurants." "Right," he said. But he didn't buy it. "She didn't tell me much. Just that you used to work together or something." I didn't correct him. Let the version sit. He stepped forward just a little. "Look, man, no offense, but is this going to be a thing?" I raised an eyebrow. "A thing? You and her?" Ah, there it was. I could have laughed. I could have said she turned me down before you even knew her name. I could have said I built a life without needing closure from a single rejection. But none of that felt true tonight. Not really. So I said, "You should probably ask her that." His jaw clenched. I did. She didn't really answer. We stood there a moment, me in my chef coat, him in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Both of us pretending this conversation didn't matter. But it did. Not because I wanted her. And not because he feared I did. But because somewhere between then and now she had become a symbol to both of us. Of who we were. Who we thought we'd be. He stepped back. "Well, good luck, I guess." And then he walked off, the sound of his shoes fading down the hall. I stood there for a while, leaning against the wall, that little folded note still pressed inside my pocket. The past wasn't knocking anymore. It was in the building. It was close to midnight by the time I got home. The street outside my place was quiet, the way it gets in the city once the late-night diners and bar crowds have gone, wherever the neon stops glowing. I stood outside my door for a second, keys in hand, just breathing in the stillness. My reflection caught in the glass of the entryway, tired eyes, chef coat still half-zipped, hair matted from the kitchen heat. I didn't look like success. I just looked like a man who worked too much. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of citrus and old books. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, and sat at the edge of the couch without turning the lights on. That note was still in my pocket. I took it out again. Read it slowly. Just 2 sentences, but the weight of them pressed like a thumb on my chest. "You were never small. I just wasn't ready to see you." It hit me differently this time. Not like a compliment. Not even like closure. More like a mirror. I used to think all I wanted was for someone like her to notice me. See past the apron, the paycheck, the barely holding it together version of me I carried around like a second skin. But sitting there in the half-light, I realized something. It wasn't about her anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. What stung back then wasn't just the rejection, it was what it confirmed. That deep, gnawing fear that maybe I really wasn't worth more than the tip line on the receipt. That maybe the future I dreamed about was a fantasy and people like me didn't get to build anything that lasted. But here I was. Not perfect. Not rich. But standing. And maybe that was enough. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling. Thought about the long nights washing dishes. The early mornings at farmers' markets. The first investor who said no. The second who said maybe. The one who finally said yes, and the day the doors of Juniper opened with only 7 reservations on the books and a fridge full of hope. I thought about the people who helped along the way, the ones who saw me before I had anything to show for it. Not because they had to, but because they believed anyway. And I thought about the kid I used to be. 23, callous fingers, asking a stranger out between table turns and daydreaming about his name on a menu. I pulled out my phone and opened my camera. Switched it to front-facing. Just looked at myself. Not to fix my hair. Not to judge the tired. Just to see. Still here, I whispered. Not for her. For me. She came back the next night. I saw her name on the reservation list around 4 in the afternoon, party of 1 this time. I stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. Samantha's back, Mia said, casual, not even looking up from the tablet. I see that. You want me to seat her? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Don't make it weird. She sat you down like a ghost last night and left a handwritten note under a water glass. I think weird's already in the building. Touché. When she walked in just after 7, she looked more like herself than she had the night before. Hair pulled back, no red dress, just jeans, a blazer, and eyes that scanned the room like she'd already rehearsed whatever she was about to do. She didn't look at the kitchen. Not at me. Just followed the host and sat quietly by the window. Ordered tea. Didn't even glance at the menu. I watched for a while. Then finally, when the lull between dinner rushes gave me room to breathe, I walked out to her table. No apron. No towel. Just me. She looked up and this time her smile was smaller. Realer? Hey, she said, voice lower, steadier. Hey. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I wasn't either. That hung there for a beat. I wanted to say something yesterday, she said. But I didn't think I had the right. I waited. She took a breath. You asked me once years ago if I wanted to get coffee. And I said no. But it wasn't because you were a waiter. I tilted my head. You literally said it was because I was a waiter. She winced, nodded. I know. But it wasn't about the job. Not really. It was because you looked at me in a way that scared me. Like you saw something real. And I wasn't ready for real. I didn't say anything. I just sat. I've gone out with 100 guys since then, she continued. Nice ones. Boring ones. Rich ones. But none of them ever looked at me like that again. Like I was something worth knowing. She paused. Swallowed. And when I saw you last night, it just hit me. What I missed. She looked at her tea untouched. I know I don't get to ask this. I know I gave up my chance when I laughed instead of listening. But if you ever wanted to try that coffee, now or someday, I'd show up. I studied her face. Not the version from 6 years ago, not the polished profile from across the dining room. Just this one, tired, hopeful, a little lost. She wasn't the girl from Sal's anymore. And I wasn't the waiter. I thought about the life I'd built, the people who showed up without needing to be convinced. Who didn't need my resume, my success, or my redemption arc. I didn't owe this moment anything. Not anger. Not forgiveness. Just honesty. So I smiled soft and said, You're not the only one who missed something. Her eyes flickered. Yeah? But I added gently, I'm not sure I'm looking for coffee right now. She nodded slowly. Tried to smile through it. Fair enough. I stood, resting my hand on the edge of the table for just a second. Enjoy the tea, I said. Then I walked back into the kitchen. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back.